Captain Amina Zara soared high above the vast desert expanse, her F-15 cutting through the scorching air like a silver arrow. The sun blazed mercilessly, casting long shadows over the barren land below. Her mission was clear: reconnaissance and safe return. But fate had other plans. Suddenly, a sharp jolt shook the cockpit violently. Alarms blared as warning lights flashed. A missile had struck her aircraft. Panic surged through her veins, but her training took over. Her right wing was severely damaged, dragging her plane into an uncontrollable spin. Radio chatter turned to static, communication lost. Alone, isolated, and in critical danger, Amina's mind raced. The desert beneath was unforgiving, a harsh landscape where only the strongest survived. Yet, despite the chaos, her heart remained unbroken. With steely resolve, she fought the controls, fighting to stabilize the crippled jet. The roar of the engine faltered, but she refused to surrender to despair. She was no ordinary pilot, she was a warrior forged by trials, trained for moments like this. Every second counted. The odds were against her, but Captain Zara was determined to defy them all. Her fingers danced over the console, flipping switches and overriding damaged systems. The plane groaned under the strain, the missing wing causing a violent imbalance. Yet, inch by inch, she coaxed it back from the brink. The desert wind whipped past the canopy as she managed to level the aircraft. Her eyes darted to the fuel gauge, dwindling fast. Her training drilled into her mind: conserve energy, think clearly, survive. She recalled the emergency protocols, scanning for the nearest friendly base. The navigation system was glitching, but her instincts and knowledge of the terrain guided her. Below, the endless sea of sand dunes shifted like waves, hiding dangers unseen. Suddenly, a plume of smoke rose far off to the east, a possible enemy sighting or another crash site. Amina's heart pounded. Could help be nearby? Or was it a trap? No time for doubt, she adjusted the throttle, pushing the damaged jet forward despite the pain and fatigue gnawing at her. The radio crackled faintly, brief fragments of voices. Was it a ghost? A lifeline? She sent out a weak distress signal, hoping someone could hear her. The minutes felt like hours. Every vibration and shudder threatened to tear the plane apart, but her will was ironclad. Memories flashed: her family, her squadron, the countless hours of training. She refused to let those memories end here, stranded and forgotten. Suddenly, the aircraft lurched violently, and she gritted her teeth. The remaining wing was taking all the strain, heat building near the engine. Her breathing steadied. She had one shot at survival, and she would take it. With steady hands and a focused mind, she prepared for an emergency landing. The desert below was a treacherous patchwork of rocks and sand, but she aimed for a flat expanse near a dry riverbed. The final descent was a battle against gravity and broken machinery. Her heart thundered in her chest as the jet skimmed the sand, sparks flying as the fuselage scraped the earth. Then, impact, the plane skidded, throwing up a cloud of dust and debris. Silence followed. Amina lay still for a moment, gathering strength, then unbuckled her harness and climbed out onto the hot sand. Her flight suit was torn, her body bruised and aching, but she stood tall. She gazed at the broken wing lying twisted behind her and then looked out across the endless desert. Her fight was far from over. With survival instincts kicking in, she retrieved her emergency kit and set off toward the distant horizon. Determined to make it back to base, her heart was unbroken, her spirit indomitable. In this vast desert warzone, Captain Amina Zara was a lone warrior, fighting not just for her life, but for the promise of returning home. The desert sun beat down mercilessly as Captain Amina Zara tightened the straps on her backpack and scanned the horizon. Her F-15, a twisted relic of battle, lay silent behind her, its shattered wing a grim reminder of how close death had been. But Amina wasn't thinking about the wreckage. Her mind was focused on one goal: survival. Her radio was dead, her only link to the outside world severed. The vast desert stretched endlessly in all directions, an ocean of sand and rock where one wrong step could mean the end. The first few hours were the hardest. Each step burned her lungs and blistered her feet. Despite the protective gear, the heat radiated off the sand and waves, warping the horizon into a shimmering mirage. She clutched her water canteen tightly, rationing every drop. Her training had prepared her for harsh conditions, but nothing could have prepared her for the brutal loneliness of this landscape. The silence was deafening, broken only by the crunch of her boots on sand and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. Amina's thoughts drifted back to her squadron, to her family waiting for her safe return. Every painful step was a promise she made to herself. She would not give up. As the sun climbed higher, her shadow grew longer and thinner. Her lips cracked from dehydration, and sweat poured down her brow. But she kept moving. She scanned the skyline for signs of life, smoke, vehicles, even distant buildings, but saw nothing but endless dunes and rocky outcrops. Her mind wrestled with doubt. Was she walking in the right direction? Had she miscalculated the location of friendly forces? The desert was a labyrinth, and she was trapped inside it. Then, through the heat haze, she spotted something, a glimmer of metal reflecting the sun. Far off in the distance. Could it be a downed aircraft? A base? Hope surged in her chest. She quickened her pace, ignoring the screaming muscles in her legs. As she approached, the shape resolved into the rusted frame of an old radio tower, long, abandoned but still standing tall against the sky. It was a landmark, something to guide her next steps. Amina allowed herself a brief moment of relief before pressing on. Night would come soon, and with it, plunging temperatures and new dangers. She found a small rocky outcrop and settled down to rest, wrapping her jacket tightly around her. Her breath came in ragged gasps, but her spirit refused to falter. Under the stars, she whispered a silent prayer, not just for survival, but for the strength to carry on. When dawn broke, the desert transformed. Shadows shifted, and the chill seeped deep into her bones. But Amina rose, determined to keep moving. She checked her emergency supplies, a limited ration of food, a small first aid kit, and a survival knife. These meager tools were now her lifeline. Her mind flickered back to the crash. She remembered the sound of the missile, the violent jolt, the terrifying loss of control. But above all, she remembered her will to live. With the sun rising behind her, she picked a direction, toward the faint trail of smoke she had seen from the air during her flight. Each step was agony, but she pushed through, driven by an iron resolve. Hours later, she stumbled upon tire tracks in the sand, fresh marks leading toward a distant ridge. Could friendly patrols be nearby? Her heart quickened, but the desert was cruel, and even hope carried its own dangers. As she moved closer to the ridge, a sudden rustling caught her attention. She froze, scanning the shadows. Out of the sandstorm's swirling dust, a lone desert fox appeared, its amber eyes reflecting the sun. For a moment, predator and survivor stared at each other, each a testament to resilience in this unforgiving land. Then, the fox vanished into the dunes, and Amina pressed onward. Her body screamed in protest, but her mind stayed sharp. She was fighting a war on two fronts, the battle in the skies and the battle on the ground, and she was winning. The sun had reached its zenith when Captain Amina Zara reached the ridge. From this vantage point, she could see farther than before, a vast sea of sand and jagged rocks stretching endlessly. Her legs ached, every muscle screaming for rest. But the sight gave her a renewed sense of direction. Below, she spotted a faint glimmer, a convoy of vehicles slowly making its way through a valley. Relief flooded through her chest. Friendly forces. She had to make contact, but the journey down the ridge was treacherous. Loose stones shifted beneath her boots, threatening to send her tumbling down the steep slope. Her fingers scraped against rough rock as she lowered herself carefully. Every second counted. If she waited too long, the convoy might pass without seeing her. Amina's mind raced through options. She didn't have any signaling devices left, the radio was destroyed, and the emergency flare had been lost in the crash. Her only chance was to catch the attention of someone in the convoy by visual means. Her eyes scanned the horizon. The desert sun was merciless, but she remembered the reflective panel she had tucked into her survival pack, a last resort tool, meant for signaling rescuers. Her heart pounded as she pulled it out and adjusted its angle to catch the sunlight. Holding it steady, she began flashing rapid bursts toward the convoy. The dazzling glints danced over the valley, catching the attention of the vehicle drivers. Moments felt like hours as she watched anxiously. Then, a vehicle veered off the path, tires kicking up clouds of dust as it raced toward her. Amina's legs wobbled, but she stood firm. As the vehicle came to a halt, a soldier jumped out, his face a mix of surprise and concern. "Captain Zara," he called out, eyes wide. "We thought you were lost." Amina nodded, voice hoarse but steady. "The F-15, wing destroyed. Radio's down. I made it on foot." Within minutes, the convoy formed a protective circle around her. Medics checked her condition and handed her water, which she gulped gratefully. As she climbed into the vehicle, Amina allowed herself a brief moment to close her eyes and breathe. The nightmare wasn't over yet, the Warzone was far from safe, but she was alive. During the ride back to base, Amina's mind replayed the events leading up to the crash, the sudden missile strike, the violent loss of control, and the impossible solo survival. She marveled at her own stubbornness, the refusal to surrender to fate. Her squadron commander awaited her at the airbase, eyes filled with relief and pride. "You made it back, Captain. That's all that matters," he said, clasping her shoulder firmly. But Amina knew the journey had changed her. The desert had tested her limits and found a strength she didn't know she possessed. In the coming days, she would face more challenges, physical therapy for her injuries, debriefings, and the daunting task of returning to the cockpit. Yet, beneath the surface, a quiet fire burned. Amina Zara was not just a survivor. She was a warrior who had stared death in the face and refused to blink. Back at the base, the sterile white walls of the medical bay were a stark contrast to the endless dunes and harsh sun of the desert. Captain Amina Zara lay on a narrow hospital Bed, the dull ache in her ribs a constant reminder of the crash. But her mind was already far from the pain, focused on what lay ahead. Doctors and nurses moved around her with practiced efficiency. They praised her resilience but warned that recovery would be long and difficult. The shattered wing of her plane symbolized more than a mechanical failure, it was a test of her spirit. Despite the exhaustion, Amina's determination remained unbroken. She had survived impossible odds in the desert, now, she would survive. Her comrades visited often. They brought stories from the front lines, small tokens, and words of encouragement. Her squadron commander stood by her side most days, his presence a steady source of strength. "You're not just a pilot, Amina. You're an inspiration," he said one afternoon, his voice quiet but firm. She smiled faintly. "I just want to fly again." Physical therapy began with gentle movements, progressing slowly to strength training. Every step forward felt like a victory, but setbacks came too, flare-ups of pain, moments of doubt, and nights haunted by vivid memories of the crash point one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow through the hospital window. Amina sat up and stared at her reflection. The face looking back was worn but unyielding. She remembered her mission, the purpose that had driven her into the skies and into battle. That purpose had not vanished. It was buried deep inside, waiting to ignite. Her instructors had already arranged simulator sessions to keep her skills sharp. The virtual cockpit was a lifeline, a place where she could reclaim control and rebuild confidence without risk. Sitting before the simulator's console, Amina adjusted the headset and gripped the controls. The screen flickered to life, painting a digital desert below. The engines roared in her ears. For hours, she practiced maneuvers, emergency protocols, and combat tactics. Each session chipped away at the fear and uncertainty. Outside the simulator, her fellow pilots watched and cheered silently. They knew she was fighting not just to return to the skies, but to reclaim herself. But it wasn't just physical strength that needed rebuilding. The emotional scars ran deep. The weight of that solo fight for survival, the isolation, the fear, the razor-thin margin between life and death, lingered in the quiet moments. Amina sought solace in letters from family and friends, in quiet walks along the base perimeter, and in long talks with her squadron commander. "You carry a burden few can understand," he said one afternoon. "But you're not alone." Those words resonated deeply. She realized that her survival wasn't just about her own grit, it was about the people who believed in her, who had fought alongside her in spirit. Slowly, the horizon brightened. The day came when she was cleared for a test flight. Standing beside the F-15 again, the plane that had once nearly claimed her life, Amina took a deep breath. Her fingers traced the cold metal wing, the one that remained whole. The engines hummed to life. The roar was familiar, a sound she had dreamed of during long nights. As the jet soared into the sky, the desert stretched beneath her like an endless challenge. This flight wasn't just about returning to duty. It was about proving to herself that even when broken, the heart could remain unbroken, and Captain Amina Zahra was ready to fly. The cockpit felt alive beneath Captain Amina Zahra's hands, the familiar hum of the instruments, the steady pulse of the engine, and the endless expanse of sky stretching out before her. After months of grueling recovery, both physical and emotional, this was her moment. The moment to prove that she was not broken, not defeated, but reborn. Her heart beat faster, a mixture of adrenaline and hope. Every system checked out perfectly as she taxied down the runway, the jet's power surging beneath her. The desert wind whipped past the open hangar doors, carrying memories of the crash, the fight, and the loneliness she had endured. As the F-15 lifted off, the weight of the past months began to dissolve into the blue sky. She felt the familiar pull of the controls, the delicate balance between power and precision. Flying was more than a job, it was a part of her soul. Her squadron had gathered near the control tower, watching with bated breath. They knew this. Flight was more than a test, it was a statement. Amina wasn't just returning, she was reclaiming her place among the elite. The jet climbed higher, slicing through the clouds with grace and power. For a moment, the desert below was just a distant memory, replaced by endless possibilities, but the warzone was still real, still dangerous. Enemy radar pings flickered on her screens, an unrelenting reminder that the skies were far from safe. Her training kicked in instantly. She evaded, maneuvered, and countered with precision honed through countless drills. The adrenaline surged, but so did her calm focus. Her damaged wing, now reinforced and repaired, held steady. The scarred metal was a testament to her survival. A reminder of the battle she had fought and won. Mid-flight, a warning blared, a nearby missile lock. Without hesitation, Amina deployed countermeasures, a shower of flares exploding behind her jet. The missile veered off course, and she streaked away into open sky. Her squadron scrambled to support, radio chatter buzzing with relief and pride. "You're back, Captain Zahra. We've got your six," came the voice of her squadron commander over the comms. Amina smiled, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Glad to be back. Hours passed as she completed the mission, patrolling, scanning, and defending. Each maneuver was a reaffirmation of her strength, resilience, and skill. When she finally landed, the applause was thunderous. Ground crew rushed to assist, but Amina waved them off. She wanted to savor the moment alone for a heartbeat. Stepping out of the cockpit, the desert sun caught the glint in her eyes, fire tempered by experience. Her fellow pilots gathered around, clapping her on the back, sharing smiles and proud glances. For them, she was more than a comrade, she was a symbol of hope and endurance. In the debriefing room, the mood was different. The air was thick with admiration and respect. Officers spoke of her bravery, her unmatched courage, and the inspiration she brought to the entire unit, but Amina remained humble. It wasn't just me, she said quietly. It was all of us, every day, facing the impossible together. That night, as she lay under the stars in the base camp, Amina felt a profound sense of peace. The silence of the desert was no longer intimidating, it was healing. Her journey had been brutal, marked by pain, fear, and loss. But it had also been filled with triumph, connection, and an unbreakable spirit. Her story was no longer just about surviving. It was about rising, above the wreckage, above doubt, and above every challenge the desert skies could throw at her. One wing lost, yes, but one heart more determined than ever. Days turned into weeks, and Captain Amina Zara's story rippled through the ranks, beyond the base, and even into the homes of those back home. Her return was more than just a military success, it was a symbol of indomitable will and hope against overwhelming odds. Despite the accolades and media attention, Amina stayed grounded. Her focus remained sharp, eyes set on the mission, on her squadron, and on the men and women who relied on her every day. But deep inside, something had shifted. The girl who once feared crashing alone in the desert had become a woman who embraced every scar, every setback, as part of her story. One afternoon, she stood in the squadron's hangar, surrounded by new recruits. Their faces were bright, eager, and full of questions. They looked at her not just as a pilot but as a mentor, a beacon of strength. She spoke plainly, her voice steady and warm. You will face fear. You will face doubt. But you must never let those things control you. Your heart, that unbreakable part inside you, that's your greatest weapon. Her words sank deep into the young pilots, many of whom had heard of her ordeal but had never met the woman behind the legend. Amina's story wasn't just about one wing lost or one plane damaged. It was about a spirit that refused to surrender, a courage that outshined any medal. She volunteered to lead more missions, flying alongside her squadron, showing that survival was not a destination but a continuous fight. The scars on her body and the repaired wing on her plane were reminders, not weaknesses, but badges of honor. As the sun set over the desert horizon, casting long shadows over the base, Amina often found herself reflecting on that harrowing day. The silence of the skies, the crack of the wing, the desperate hours of solitude. She realized those moments of darkness had forged her into who she was, stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever came next. Her story inspired others to face their battles with grit and grace. She became a symbol not just of survival, but of thriving despite adversity. In the years to come, her name would be spoken with reverence, her flight studied in academies, and her courage celebrated across the Air Force. But for Amina, the greatest victory was the quiet knowledge that she had refused to let death win that day in the desert. That she had flown back against all odds, one wing lost, one heart unbroken, and that, no matter what storms may come, the human spirit could always soar.